Dr. Lyra Velen sat inside the observation chamber of Orbital Station 11, a ring-shaped lab floating silently above Earth. The planet below glowed like a blue jewel, its clouds moving like soft waves. To her, it was not home. It was only a subject, part of a study that would help the Galactic Council understand the strange, unpredictable species that called themselves human. She had never met one face to face. Her job was simple: collect data, record behavior, and file reports about their society, emotions, and choices. Her species, the Alari, believed emotion was a weakness. Logic and control had guided their civilization for thousands of years, and they saw the human way of living with its laughter pain. In chaos as proof of their immaturity, Lyra was the youngest xenobiologist in the Council's research division. She took pride in her discipline, in her ability to see life as equations and patterns. But even she could not deny there was something different about humans. They rebuilt their homes after disasters, helped strangers, and still looked at the stars with wonder. Her reports grew longer, filled with words like unpredictable and resilient. Every morning, she began her shift with calm precision. She adjusted her instruments, reviewed transmissions, and studied the hundreds of video feeds showing different parts of Earth-busy cities, quiet villages, and deep forests. To her, each human was a part of a grand experiment, story she could measure in data. But one day, her calm routine was interrupted. A new feed came online, focusing on a small human settlement near an ocean. The cameras followed rescue teams repairing a damaged energy grid after a storm. Amid the chaos, one man stood out. He was tall, wearing a torn work suit, his face streaked with dirt. Yet he smiled as he helped lift a fallen beam to free a trapped worker. His voice, though the sound was faint through the feed, carried warmth. Lyra paused the footage. She zoomed in. The data tag identified him as Ethan Cole, an engineer with the United Earth Reconstruction Program. She watched him for several minutes, studying how he moved and spoke. He didn't behave like the models in her reports. When his own tools broke, he laughed. When a stranger scolded him for a mistake, he didn't respond with anger. He simply apologized and fixed it. She added a note to her log. Subject 42C displays. Consistent. Empathy despite stress. Possible anomaly. For days, she returned to that feed. Her colleagues noticed her growing interest. Still studying the primitive species? Her mentor teased through the intercom. They never stop surprising you, do they? They do, she replied softly, not realizing she meant it. Her work began to shift. She wrote less about groups and more about individuals. She wanted to understand what made people like Ethan behave differently. Late at night, when the station lights dimmed and the earth turned beneath her, she would replay recordings of his team talking, laughing, and sharing food. The sound of their voices was strangely comforting. Lyra tried to explain it through science. She told herself she was studying emotional communication. But deep inside, a quiet thought grew: maybe humans were not just subjects. Maybe they were mirrors showing what her people had lost long ago. One evening, as she analyzed Ethan's voice patterns, the transmission broke into static. She frowned, adjusting her console. A solar storm was passing close to Earth, disrupting signals. Without thinking, she opened a communication link meant for emergencies and tried to stabilize the channel manually. A voice came through, faint. Human, real. Hello? Who's there? This line isn't supposed to be active. Lyra froze. She had not meant to open a two-way link. Council protocol forbade contact with subjects. She could lose her license, even her citizenship. But curiosity held her still. I'm a researcher, she said carefully, using the universal translator embedded in her console. I study communication systems. I didn't mean to disturb you. The man on the other end laughed softly. Well, that's a first. Usually we get silence or static from up there. I'm Ethan, who are you? She hesitated. Lyra, she said finally. Nice to meet you, Lyra. Where are you calling from? Somewhere above, she answered. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He chuckled again, and the sound sent a strange warmth through her. Above, huh? You make it sound like you're an angel watching us. I am not, she said quickly, a little flustered. I am a scientist. Even better, he replied. Angels might give us blessings, but scientists give us answers. The connection ended when the storm intensified, but the sound of his voice stayed in her mind. That night, Lyra could not sleep. For the first time in years, she replayed a conversation not for research, but because she wanted to hear it again in the following days. She found reasons to contact him against small excuses to ask about his work, his machines, or the conditions on the surface. Ethan always answered with patience and humor. He told her about fixing power grids, helping local communities. In his dream of building clean energy systems so no one would live in darkness again, Lyra listened carefully, recording every word, but her notes began to change. She wrote phrases that were not scientific. He speaks with hope. He believes in possibility. Her mentor noticed the new tone in her reports and questioned her. Are you letting the subjects influence your thinking? Dr. Velen? The senior researcher asked sternly. No, she said too quickly. But after the call ended, she stared at the screen and wondered if she had lied. The next week, a disaster struck near Ethan's region. A massive ocean current caused flooding in several settlements. Lyra watched helplessly as live feeds showed people running for shelter. Ethan's team was in the center of it, trying to rescue civilians. Her instruments registered his location, dangerously close to the collapsing energy tower. Her pulse raced, a physical reaction she barely recognized. She called the control room. We have to send assistance, she demanded. Assistance? Her supervisor replied coldly. They are not council citizens. We are observers, not participants. Lyra clenched her fists. The logic made sense, but her heart screamed against it. Every instinct told her to act. When the signal showed Ethan trapped near the tower, she broke protocol. She used the station's field projectors to stabilize the structure remotely, buying time for the humans to escape. It was a small action, invisible to the council, but it saved dozens of lives. Later, she told herself it was necessary for maintaining the study. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She had acted out of care, not science. That night, Ethan contacted her again. Lyra, he said softly through the static, someone helped us. The readings show an unknown energy field came from orbit. Was that you? She hesitated, then whispered, You are safe. That is what matters. He didn't press further. Instead, he said, Thank you. 2 simple words, yet they carried more meaning than any report she had ever written. Days passed. Their conversations grew longer. Ethan asked about her world, her people, and her life beyond the stars. Lyra answered carefully, revealing little but listening more. She learned about human music, art, and the strange beauty of emotion. He once told her, We may not be perfect, but we feel things deeply. That's what makes us human. She smiled at that, though he could not see it. Maybe that is what makes you special, she said quietly. In time, her reports to the council grew late. Her mentor sent warnings, demanding she refocus her attention. But Lyra's heart was no longer steady. The line between observation and connection had blurred beyond repair. She began to dream about the earth below, about standing on its soil and hearing the wind with her own ears. She imagined meeting Ethan not through a screen but face to face, when she looked at her reflection on the glass. She hardly recognized herself. The calm, logical scientist was gone. In her place stood someone who had begun to feel. She didn't know it yet. But the project that once defined her life was about to change everything she believed. The woman who thought she was studying humanity would soon discover what it meant to be human. Lyra woke before dawn, though space had no real dawn. The earth glowed below her, half in darkness, half covered in soft golden light. She watched as the sunlight crept across the oceans, and for a long moment, she simply stared. It was strange she used to see that planet as a study subject. Now, it looked beautiful, alive, and full of stories. Her reports were overdue again. The council had already sent 2 reminders, both polite but firm. She had ignored them. Her mind was not on data anymore. It was on Ethan. Their talks had become something she looked forward to more than anything else. Each time, his voice reached her through the speakers. It made her world feel a little less lonely when he spoke. He never tried to impress her. He told her about simple things, fixing damaged circuits, helping rebuild villages, and sometimes just watching the ocean waves when he was tired. Lyra found peace in those moments. His words painted images of life that her people had forgotten long ago. That day, she prepared to call him again. An alert flashed across her console. It was from the council headquarters. The message was short. Dr. Velen, unauthorized transmission activity detected. Cease communication with planetary subjects immediately. A compliance audit will follow. Her chest tightened. They knew. Somehow, they had found traces of her private calls. She closed the message quickly, afraid that even reading it too long would make things worse. Moments later, the communication light blinked. It was Ethan. She hesitated before answering, then pressed the button. His face appeared on the holoscreen, blurry from static, but still smiling. "You look tired," he said. "Long night?" She forced a small smile. "Something like that." "How are you?" "Still alive," he joked. "We finished the southern grid repairs. I might sleep for a week." Lyra wanted to laugh, but worry clouded her thoughts. "Ethan," she said softly, "what would you do if you discovered someone watching your world? Studying your people?" He raised an eyebrow. "Depends. Are they trying to hurt us?" "No," she said quickly. "Just learning." He leaned back in his chair, thinking. "Then I'd probably ask them why. And if they were honest with me, I'd want to show them what they missed by only watching." His answer struck her more deeply than she expected. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze through the screen. "Maybe they have already seen too much," she murmured. He smiled. "Then maybe it's time they saw it up close." The words made her heart skip. She ended the call before she could say something she shouldn't, but all day the thoughts stayed with her. Up close, that evening, Lyra stood at the airlock bay, staring at the shuttle docked inside. It was small, meant for sample collection and short-distance missions. No council officer would expect her to use it. The rules were clear. Searchers could not interact directly with developing species. But rules suddenly felt meaningless. She had already crossed the line when she first spoke to Ethan. What difference would it make to see him in person? Her hand hovered over the launch panel. Logic screamed at her to stop. Emotion whispered otherwise. And for the first time in her life, Lyra listened to her heart. The shuttle broke through the clouds over the Atlantic Ocean. The view was breathtaking. Waves shimmered under the moonlight, and the coastline glittered with human settlements. She guided the craft to an abandoned research facility near the edge of a coastal forest one Ethan had mentioned before. It was quiet, hidden, and safe. When she stepped onto Earth's soil, she froze. The air was cool, damp with the scent of rain and salt. Gravity felt heavier here, but it grounded her. She took a slow breath. For the first time in her life, she was part of the world she had only observed. A faint sound made her turn. Ethan stood at the edge of the trees, holding a lantern. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to awe. "Lyra," he whispered. She nodded, heart pounding. "You said I should see it up close." He stepped closer, studying her with wide eyes. The moonlight reflected off her pale blue skin and silver hair. "You're not from Earth," he said quietly. "No," she admitted. "I am Alari. My people study other worlds." "I was not supposed to reveal myself." Instead of fear, Ethan smiled gently. "Then I guess I just met the galaxy's bravest scientist." Lyra blinked in surprise. "You are not afraid?" He shrugged. "You saved lives during the storm. I don't think someone who does that needs to be feared." She felt warmth rise inside her chest. It was a feeling she could not measure or explain. "You should not trust me so easily," she said softly. "My people would not approve of this." "Then it's a good thing you're not your people right now," he said. They talked for hours under the open sky. Lyra asked questions she had always wanted to ask directly: what made humans laugh? What made them cry? Why they still dreamed even when life was hard? Ethan answered honestly, sometimes with stories, sometimes with silence. She realized that the beauty of humanity was not in their perfection, but in their persistence. When dawn touched the horizon, she knew she should leave. The council would notice her absence soon. She stood reluctantly, but Ethan reached out and said, "Will I see you again?" Lyra hesitated. Every rule said no. Yet the look in his eyes made her whisper yes. Back on the station, her console was flashing red. Multiple encrypted messages awaited her. Her mentor's voice came through immediately when she answered, "Dr. Velen, where were you? Your shuttle log shows unauthorized planetary entry." Lyra tried to speak calmly. "I was gathering environmental data. Do not lie to me," the older Alari snapped. "Your project is suspended pending review. You will return to the council for questioning." The call ended abruptly. Lyra sat in silence. For the first time in her career, she felt fear not of punishment, but of being separated from something she had just begun to understand. The next few days were chaos. The council sent a retrieval ship toward her station. Her colleagues avoided her, afraid to be involved. She knew they would soon erase her access and take her away. Desperate, she sent one last message to Ethan. "They are coming for me. I cannot explain everything, but I may not return." His reply came almost instantly. "Where are you? I'll find you." She smiled sadly. "You can't, but thank you for wanting to." Before she could power down the terminal, the station shook violently. Alerts filled the orbital debris collision detected. One of the outer reactors had been hit by fragments from an old satellite. Fire spread across the modules, and the emergency systems began to fail. She rushed to stabilize the core manually. Her hands moved quickly over the controls, but her mind was racing. The retrieval ship was still hours away. If the station's reactor went critical, debris would fall to Earth. Hundreds could die. She needed help. Only one person she trusted could reach her fast enough. Lyra opened the emergency communication line. "Ethan, it's me. I need you." He responded at once. "Tell me what to do." She explained the situation in simple terms. Using the ground relays he had built, Ethan redirected power from Earth's orbital grid to the damaged modules, keeping the systems stable long enough for her to shut them down. Sweat ran down his face as he worked. But he didn't stop until the station lights turned green again. "It's done," she whispered, collapsing in her chair. "You saved them." "No," he said softly through the communicator. "We saved them." For a long time, neither spoke. The static between their words felt like a heartbeat. Lyra finally said, "If the council finds out you helped, they will erase everything. They will say, it was just data, nothing more." "Then let them," Ethan replied. "I know the truth. So do you." Her eyes filled with emotion she didn't have a name for. She realized that the thing her people called weakness was the very force that made life worth living. The council's retrieval ship arrived soon after. As it locked onto her station, Lyra stared at Earth below and whispered to herself, "Maybe logic isn't everything." But deep inside, she knew the real fight hadn't even begun. The council ship hovered above the orbital station like a silver moon, quiet but full of authority. Dr. Lyra Velen stood by the viewport, her reflection trembling against the glow of warning lights. She knew what was coming. She had broken the greatest rule of her people. She had interfered with the developing world. And worse, she had felt something for a human. Through the communicator, her mentor's calm voice filled the room. "Dr. Velen, prepare for immediate retrieval. You are under review for emotional compromise and unauthorized contact. Remain cooperative, and this process will be painless." The word echoed in her mind. They would not harm her, but they would take away everything: her research, her memories, even the small moments that made her human inside. The council had methods to suppress emotional influence. Once it was done, she would forget Ethan completely. She turned away from the window and looked at the small communicator on her desk. Ethan's signal was still active. She had hidden it from the council's scanners. One message from her could expose everything, but silence would mean he'd never know what happened. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the button. "Ethan," she said softly, "they're here. I can't stay." His voice came through, rough with static. "Lyra, listen to me. We can get you out." "I know you're scared." She shook her head. "No, you don't understand. If I resist, they'll see Earth as a threat. They'll send more ships. I can't let that happen. You can't just give up, he said firmly. You risked everything for us. Let me return the favor, Lyra smiled sadly. You already did. You reminded me what life feels like. A deep hum shook the walls as the retrieval beam locked onto her station. The air shimmered with blue light. She only had seconds. Ethan, promise me you'll keep believing in what humans are. Promise me you'll never stop looking up at the stars. I promise, he whispered. But I'm not saying goodbye. The line went dead as the beam engulfed her. The world around her changed. She woke inside the council vessel, restrained by magnetic cuffs that pulsed softly against her wrists. The chamber was clean, metallic, emotionless like everything her people built. Across from her stood her mentor, Elder Terran, his expression unreadable. You disappointed many, Lyra, he said quietly. We had faith in your logic. Instead, you let emotion cloud your judgment. I learned something, she replied. Something no data can show. He tilted his head slightly. And what is that? That emotion isn't weakness. It's understanding. Without it, we only see the surface of life. Terran sighed. That is exactly why we avoid it. Emotion leads to chaos, to rebellion, to ruin.
Oh.
She met his gaze steadily. And logic without empathy leads to emptiness.
Oh.
For the first time, he hesitated. The faintest flicker of doubt crossed his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You will be taken to memory reformation, he said finally. After that, you will be reassigned to analytical work. No more field studies. 2 guards entered to escort her. Lyra walked quietly between them, her mind spinning. Her heart felt heavy, but a spark of determination grew stronger inside her. They could erase her memories, but not the truth she had seen. Humans were not perfect, but they were alive in a way her people could never understand as she was led through the corridors. She noticed a screen showing incoming transmissions. One message flickered for an instant before the guards turned it off. She had only seen a few words, but they made her freeze. Message from Earth Emergency Signal for Dr. Lyra Velen. Her heart raced. Ethan had sent something. Somehow he had reached them. The guards noticed her hesitation and pushed her forward, but it was too late. The seed of hope had already taken root. Hours later, she was placed inside a circular chamber filled with pale light. The technician, another Elari, prepared the neural interface that would erase her emotional memories. Please relax, he said gently. You will feel nothing. But she didn't relax. She stared at the energy cables running through the floor, her mind working quickly. She had designed similar systems before. She knew how to overload them as the technician stepped away. She whispered, I'm sorry, and pulled the cuffed bracelets toward the control panel. Sparks flew as the field destabilized. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and the technician shouted in panic. Lyra used the moment to dash through the side hatch before the door sealed. The corridor outside tilted as the ship entered lockdown mode. Automated drones swarmed toward her, but she ducked into an access tunnel leading to the cargo bay. Her lungs burned as she ran, but she kept going. At the far end of the bay, the stars shimmered through a transparent shield. A single maintenance pod sat ready for deployment. She activated the hatch controls, her fingers trembling. The ship's voice echoed through the speakers. Unauthorized launch detected. Security override in progress. Lyra smiled faintly. Not this time. She pressed the final command and the pod ejected from the ship, spinning through the darkness of space. The stars blurred around her as she guided the craft toward the faint blue light of Earth. Behind her, alarms from the council ship grew distant. Ahead of her was the world she had come to love. The descent was rough, but she managed to land near the coastline where she had first met Ethan. The night sky was clear, the waves calm. She stumbled out of the pod, weak but breathing. Moments later, she saw light in the distance vehicles approaching. Ethan was in front, running toward her. His clothes dusty, but his smile wide. You came back, he said breathlessly. So did you, she whispered. Her voice shaking, he reached out his hand. You're safe now. She looked at him, then at the sky above where faint glimmers of council ships still lingered. Not yet, she said. They'll follow. They can't allow me to stay. Ethan took a deep breath. Then we'll make sure they can't find you. He led her into a hidden shelter beneath the cliffs, an old research base converted into a safe zone. His team, a small group of engineers and scientists, greeted her with awe. You're the alien? One of them whispered. Lyra nodded politely. I was a scientist. Now, I suppose I'm a refugee. They spent days repairing the pod and hiding traces of her landing. During that time, Lyra learned more about human kindness than any study could show. They shared their food, their stories, even their laughter. None of it was logical, yet it made perfect sense one evening. Ethan found her sitting by the sea, watching the horizon glow with city lights. Do you ever regret it? He asked, leaving everything you knew. She shook her head. No. My people live long lives, but we forgot what it means to feel. You humans reminded me, smiled softly. So what happens now? Lyra looked up at the stars. The council will search for me, but I can hide here for a while. Maybe one day they'll understand. Maybe they'll see that humanity isn't chaos, it's courage. Ethan sat beside her in silence. The ocean whispered below them, endless and calm. Then, one night, a storm of light appeared in the sky. The council ship had returned, scanning the area. Lyra knew she couldn't run forever. She stood and faced the horizon. I have to end this, she said. If they think humans are a threat, they'll destroy this world. Ethan grabbed her hand. Then don't go alone. Together they climbed back into her pod and launched toward the orbiting ship. As they approached, Lyra sent a transmission directly to the council command channel. This is Dr. Lyra Velen, she said calmly. You will not harm this planet? I stand as its protector, her mentor's voice answered, cold and weary. You're defying direct order, Lyra. You are risking your life for a primitive world. No, she replied. I'm honoring it. For the first time, I understand what life means. Silence filled the channel. Then, to her surprise, the council ship began to pull away. Elder Terran's voice returned, softer than before. Perhaps. There is more to learn from these humans than we believed. The transmission ended. The ship turned, retreating toward deep space. Lyra slumped in relief. Earth was safe for now, back on the surface. People around the world watched as the strange light vanished from their skies. Few knew what truly happened, but whispers began to spread of a being from the stars who had defended humanity not with weapons, but with compassion. In the weeks that followed, Lyra stayed on Earth, teaching what she could about healing, energy, and cooperation. Ethan worked beside her, their bond growing stronger each day. Sometimes, when the night was quiet, she would gaze at the stars and wonder if her people were watching. Perhaps one day they would return not as observers, but as friends. As the wind brushed through her hair and the ocean roared softly below, she smiled. She had once believed humans were only a project. Now she knew they were a story, one her heart would never stop telling.